welcome to the original Gangsters Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Burnstein. We're going to do a state of the Montreal Mafia episode, Rizzuto Crime Family 2025, where it stands in terms of power, stature, stability, and do a review of what's happened recently and what the impact historically is and what the impact is in modern times and real time, and do kind of a scorecard or a grading, if you will, of how probably the greatest North American mafia dynasty in modern times, the Rizzutos, have come off the ropes and have come out it looks like has come out the other side of 15 years plus of instability to, in the last 4 or 5 months, stabilize. And it appears that bright skies are here and are in the future as well for the status of the Borgata, and you contrast that to what it looked like a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. There were a lot of people writing the obituary for the Rizzuto Mafia dynasty, and it's maybe not stronger than ever, but definitely as strong as it's been in a while, and reestablished their business relationship with the Hells Angels in late 2024, and are really back to being a well-oiled machine. A lot of that is credited to the Godfather, Leonardo Rizzuto, aka Leo the Lawyer, who has really been underrated and has really stepped up and been a man that has met the moment. He is, in a lot of ways, a real-life incarnation of Michael Corleone, and we can go into that comparison in a little bit, from the Godfather, the fictional Godfather trilogy. And he has almost done the impossible, bring that family that was on the brink of falling apart, and in some cases looked like it had fallen apart, and he put it all back together. And he, again, has proven that lineage, that bloodline, is pretty strong. And even if you're a guy that was trained as a professional, trained as an attorney, when the bright lights turn on and you're cast into the role, you adapt. And he's adapted, Leo Rizzuto. There was a learning curve, and there was some time I think it took for him to get his footing as a leader, as a crime boss. But he's thriving right now. And again, we'll get to that in a second. But let's talk about news that broke this past couple days, and another big time player that has made quite the impact in a short period of time, and that is the Rizzuto crime family alleged underboss Pet Diodamo, aka Black Pete, who is turning out to be one of the great minds and diplomats in Montreal mob, at least recent history. He's kind of been a wild card sleeper that came out of the shadows in this last couple of years. Made a reputation as a skipper that controlled the southwest side of Montreal, and then was promoted to underboss in the last 15 months, and was the driving force behind the peace summit with the Hells Angels and ending 2 years of warfare. Pet Diodamo was arrested this week, pulled over in a luxury bulletproof armored SUV a Wednesday afternoon, searched, found a gun. They charged him on Thursday with being a felon in possession of a firearm. They also charged him with money laundering. He is also, before this, was already facing allegations of threatening police surveillance teams. So it's been as the ascent for Pete Diodamo took flight. There's been kind of a string of legal issues, and it started in the end of 2023. His house was raided in relation to a cold case murder probe. Right now, he's being investigated by narcotics investigators, both local in Quebec as well as RCMP, and it was a narco squad that pulled him over on Wednesday. He was with a pretty notorious Irish mob figure, Larry Cooney, who is a multiple-time convicted felon. He was charged as well as being a felon in possession of a firearm. And then a guy, Josh Sapoino, who beat a murder case a couple years ago and is supposedly Pete Diodamo's nephew. So we'll keep an eye out. Pete Diodamo, the last we checked, has not yet been released. I believe he will be by the end of the weekend. I know Larry Cooney and Josh, so I think it's Sapporo. I apologize for butchering the name. They both have been released already. There was a hearing on Thursday. Pete Diodamo, in addition to being Leo Rizzuto's number 2 and underboss, he allegedly goes out, dates Leo's sister, Bettina Rizzuto, Mafia princess. Their dad was the legendary Vito Rizzuto. Their grandfather, the legendary Uncle Nicolo Nicolo Zio. And she is, like her brother Leo, an attorney, someone who's a professional. And she was present on Thursday at the hearing, at the arraignment. So we'll definitely, as I said, keep an eye out on that. But going back to what Diodamo has been able to do in the last year, 2 years in his climb into the administration is, leverage his network. And he's a guy that's very connected. He's known as someone who's great with logistics, and has, for a long time, dating back to the days of Vito Rizzuto, he was the go-between for the Montreal Sicilian Mafia and the West End gang, the Irish mob. Has been working with those guys for a long time and was able to leverage that and his connections with the Hells Angels to get everybody on the same page. Back in December, we broke it for you exclusively here at Original Gangsters Podcast and our companion web magazine, The Gangster Report, about this historic peace summit that took place in the second week of December at Diadamo, where Leo Rizzuto and Hells Angels boss, international biker superpower Marty Robert and entourages and security teams came together and put an end to 26 months of warfare. And for people that are watching this, they know the old drill that the Rizzutos and the Hells Angels had been longtime allies. Vito Rizzuto brought those two organizations together in the early 80s. And for a variety of reasons, the business relationship began to fray in the late 2010s. And by 2022, war had begun. It was contained. the end of 2022, there were a number of incidents, meetings, shootings, attempted assassinations that hadn't really hit the media or mainstream consumption sphere. And then in March of 2023, almost exactly 2 years ago, the attempted assassination of Leo Rizzuto, expressway shooting, right at early rush hour. He was shot in the foot and in the chest by a hit team that was, according to investigators, dispatched by members of the Hells Angels who were working with Pet Diodamo, who was a longtime veteran Rizzuto mob lieutenant, skipper, that was pushed out of the crime family when he came home in 2019. Had been Leo Rizzuto's bodyguard at one point back in the 90s, ran Vito Rizzuto's sports book and was in charge of collections, a reputation that preceded him anywhere he went, and pushed out by Leo and went and took refuge with the Hells Angels and led another insurgents, because the Rizzutos had been dealing with these insurgencies a decade and a half since Vito Rizzuto went to prison in the United States, and his street bosses and top advisors turned against him, went to war against him, and then his own, after he dies of cancer in 2023, other street bosses, Scopa brothers, they lead another insurgents. So there's been like 3 different variations of insurgencies that the Rizzuto crime family and the Rizzuto Mafia dynasty have had to overcome. And that brings us to Leo Rizzuto and how he's been bucking the odds and has been impressing a lot of people with his acumen as a mafia don, and is living up again to the reputations and the resumes of his dad and his grandpa, really coming into his own in the last year to 2 years. And I think when a lot of people were counting him out, thinking that the crime family was going to crumble like a house of cards and he was going to die in the street like his brother did, but it didn't happen. He was playing chess and was staying under the radar intentionally, being very deliberate in his movements, wasn't acting crazy, didn't go all cowboy style and start, for lack of a better term, shitting where he ate or where he slept. Wasn't bringing war directly around him. It was a lot of proxies, a lot of organizations that he was making deals with through various intermediaries to fight for him. And it looks like he made a lot of the right decisions. We found out last week in some great reporting by the Journal de Montreal, in the direct aftermath of the assassination attempt in March of 2023, Leo Rizzuto took refuge and counsel in Sicily, that he was able to consolidate a number of Sicilian mafia clans behind him. If he needed their support, they offered it. Law enforcement in Sicily were worried that the Hells Angels were to come across the border, or not. There are Hells Angels chapters in Italy. They thought that it was very possible that the Hells Angels that he was fighting with in Canada were going to come stalk him in Sicily. So it was a very serious situation, as we all know. Pet Diodamo did not make it through 2023. Didn't even make it through the summer. He was killed leaving a meeting with the Hells Angels in June of 2023. And there's still questions about where that came from and who knew what when. Was it coming from the Rizzutos or was it coming from the Hells Angels? Still up for debate, but the war continued, spread across the province, and then came to an end. And Pet Diodamo was the straw that stirred the drink in how to put it all back together. And he was, I guess, in some ways acting in both an advisory capacity. I mean, he wasn't the consigliere. We'll talk about that in a second. But he was filling his first administrative role, and he masterminded how to end the war and get everyone's business interests aligned again. And it was through the creation of the union. And we've talked about that. We broke the news about that as well. In the weeks and days surrounding that peace summit in December, Diodamo had brought to fruition a brainchild of his, which was a regulatory enforcement body known as the Union, with representatives from the Rizzutos, the Hells Angels, the West End Gang, the Irish Mob, various street gangs, biker clubs, support clubs for the Hells Angels in multiple provinces, and that they were going to, regulate and deliver the messages from the top brass and the Rizzutos and the Hells Angels, who will once again be under the same banner in terms of the sports gambling, the drugs, the prostitution markets in Quebec and Ontario. And it's worked. The violence has stopped. The union is becoming what Pet Diodamo envisioned it could be. How Pete's legal issues right now play into the future of that, only time will tell. But so Leo Rizzuto has been, let's color up the Godfather analogy. So, there's really only two North American mob dynasties that are still active: the Persicos in the American La Cosa Nostra, the Colombo crime family, and the Rizzutos in Montreal. And they both took power around the same time in the late 70s, and have both had to dodge a lot of landmines to keep that empire and that dynasty alive and well. And wars launched by formerly loyal lieutenants and underbosses and acting bosses. There's the parallel there. But I will say, I really think that, and this is no disrespect to the Persicos and the Colombos, but what the Rizzutos were able to build across the border in Canada, and then across other borders across the pond, is the kind of stuff that doesn't come around every day. And not that the Persicos dynasty does either, but it seems to me that the Rizzuto Mafia dynasty is at a higher level of reach, of scope, of scale, of connections internationally. And, even some of the bloodlines with the Persico Mafia dynasty, you got a lot of cousins involved. With the Rizzutos, it's just from Nick to Vito to Nikki and Leo, and that's it. We don't see a lot of. I mean, there was a brother-in-law that disappeared in in the wars that were taking place. One of Vito's brother-in-laws, but for the most part, it's the apple is not falling far from the tree, and that tree, like I said, that there's a very significant parallel to the fictional Corleone family from The Godfather. You have, just bear with me for a second. let me flesh this out. Vito with he didn't have 3 sons; he had 2 sons. So we're going to take Fredo out of the equation. But you have the guy that built it, and really father and son kind of built it together, Nicolo and Vito. And then you have the prodigal sons, and that's Leo and Nicky. And Nicky was Sonny, and Leo was Michael. And just like Sonny, who was, ended his life in a blaze of glory in some ways, just, one of the great scenes in cinema history, gunned down at the toll booth. And Nicky was gunned down leaving a meeting, and gunned down in cold blood, broad daylight. So just like in that scenario where Nicky, a la Sonny, was thought to be the next generation who was going to lead the respective mafia dynasties forward. But that's not what fate had in store. And in the fictional Godfather story, Michael goes from somebody that was not, in terms of the crime family, they didn't see Michael destined to be a leader. He was going to be a professional. He was a war hero. And he got into the role because he had to, because Sonny was gone. His dad was incapacitated. He needed to take over, and turned into, he thrived in the role of Godfather. And Leo Rizzuto was, he's an attorney. I don't think his dad saw him as somebody that was going to lead the mafia dynasty. I think he was looked at as like a Tom Hagen, to keep on with the Godfather analogies. But when Nicky died, and then Vito died, Nicky died from a homicide. Vito died of cancer, and then Uncle died before that. Uncle was killed. I should say grandfather was killed. I'm sorry. Uncle Nick, the grandfather, was assassinated as well. And then successors start to drop. Skunk Giordano, the original Sauce Solicito. And Leo Rizzuto has to step in and fill the void. And there were a lot of people that doubted his ability. And again, we're sitting here almost a decade later. A couple years ago, a year ago, it looked like he was on the run and was going to be hunted down like a dog and killed. But he's had the last laugh. Again, he was playing chess, like some 3-4 dimensional chess. And by the people he put around him, by the decisions he made, tactical decisions he made, the push and pull balance between diplomacy and exerting force, he's been on the money. And he's had to do this with his previous underboss, Stefano Solicito, Little Sauce, on the sidelines for a lot of this war, for most of the war, battling health issues. And that's where Pete Diodamo was able to step in. It's not shocking if you know you can connect the dots with a lot of these characters in our Montreal underworld drama. Pete Diodamo was mentored by Rocco Solicito and was somebody that very close with Stefano Solicito as a young man, as he climbed the ranks of the crime family. And it's not shocking that he stepped in and eased the pain, literally and figuratively, of Leo losing his underboss and his day-to-day top, his top guy. So now Pete Diadamo's filling that role. Consigliere is Mimi, Carmelo Canestraro, represents the old Campari Frank Arcady camp, the Calabrian wing of the Rizzutos. Some people think that Campari Frank is actually the consigliere deep in the shadows, and Mini Me is more acting. Can't confirm that, but I will say that Campari Frank has. If this is a game, he's winning, because he's the only member of Vito Rizzuto's inner circle that's still alive, that was not murdered, and he's been very stealth, very quiet, and I think has been able to toe that line between being cautious and savvy, but still making everybody know, I'm nobody to be trifled with. And I'm still going to have my people on the street, and I'm still going to have my ear to the street, and I'm still going to be used for some advisory purpose. So just because we haven't heard about him in many of the headlines, I don't think he is completely out of the picture, just based on the fact that I'm told by my law enforcement sources, as well as my sources on the street, that Mini-Me is consigliere. Now, there are fives underneath the main administrators that have all played major roles in getting the Rizzuto crime family back up to snuff, getting the ship righted. At the top of that list is Baldy Barbario, street boss, the number one skipper, the day-to-day leader, the guy that has the complete faith and trust of the administration. And he's also the de facto, or maybe not so de facto, leader of the kind of younger generation, him and Joey Gator. So, you got Baldy Barbario, who is quarterbacking everything on a day-to-day basis. And then you got four guys underneath him, one that's about to come out of prison somewhat shortly. I know he's looking for day parole, and that's Nicky Spagnolo. Vito Salvaggio is another one. Joey Gator and Marco Pizzi. Eastside Marco, he's also looking at a potential case. He was arrested and raided a couple months ago. We're still waiting for more information on that. But Joey Gator in out north. But that is a formidable top five capos, and these guys have stood really strong in the face of adversity. And just like Leo Rizzuto, who's been the picture of resilience, so has these guys. They've just really, again, like Leo, the skippers. Even though Nicky's been locked up for a couple years, we're talking about Joey Gator, Marco Pizzi, Baldy Barbario, Vito Salvaggio. These guys have been the lifeblood. And when Leo Rizzuto had to leave the country, when Stefano Solicito is battling health concerns, those guys in Pet Diodamo are the ones that had to batten down the hatches and boots on the ground, keep this thing from falling apart. And that's what they've been able to do. And Baldy Barbario is a lot like Pet Diodamo, very well liked, very connected, and somebody that can have that cross section of toughness and fearlessness, but also can be pretty easygoing and can get on people's level and talk at their level and be true leaders. And that's something that not everybody has, whether on the street or in the boardroom or on an athletic team. Guys that people just gravitate to, and that's Baldy Barbario. Joey Gator's a little bit more flamboyant, but just as much as a force to be reckoned with. Marco Pizzi, another underrated guy that is constantly, he's got like 10 lives. People have been shooting at Marco Pizzi for a decade, and he keeps really tiptoeing through the landmines and is shown that he's like a samurai, like a ninja. Baldy Barbario survived the attempt on his life as well. These are guys that spit nails, man. Really, they spit nails. And I think I was guilty of thinking that there was no way that the Rizzutos would be able to withstand this push by the Hells Angels, and they did. And I'm the first one to say that I was wrong. And I'm reporting here in the spring of 2025 that the Rizzuto crime family is back and is a force once again, and has stabilized and are moving and grooving, man, ripping and running. So that's my 2025 state of affairs with the Montreal Mafia and the Rizzuto crime family. A lot still going on, even though war is over with the Hells Angels, and they're working closely with them again and making a lot of money, not as many headlines. But, we got some cases hanging over some guys' heads. Pet Diodamo, Marco Pizzi, possibly. And Stefano Solicito has the BM Montpont murder conspiracy case that he's being investigated for. But who knows if the charges will come, but we know that he's a top suspect in that. And that was a black street boss, or I should say a black drug boss that was working for various factions, and at one point was working for the Rizzutos, another point was working against them. And it was believed that he had been given a contract and was looking to carry out a contract on the head of Stefano Solicito, and it didn't end well for BM Montpont. Nonetheless, he hasn't been charged yet, and only time will tell if he is charged. So please like, share, and subscribe. The Original Gangsters Podcast. That's the state of the Rizzuto crime family in 2025. We'll always keep you updated in the latest breaking news coming across the border in the Great White North. Scott Burnstein, OG Pod, uncovering the underworld, one city, one region, one country at a time. I'm out.